South Africa's health and safety stats for the mining industry in the past year are an improvement from previous years. To talk to us about this and the concept of zero harm, we are joined by Thuthula. Thuthula, thank you so much for your time. Let's get into those safety stats, those health and safety stats for 2024. As I mentioned in my intro, there was a marked improvement.
Yes.
What can we attribute it to?
As you say, we have had quite an improvement of about 24% on the safety side, 17% decline on health, and it's a collective effort. We always say that, our success lies with our tripartite approach, which is, the Mine Health and Safety Council, where we have the state, organized business, organized labor, in terms of the policies that we push through and also the initiatives that we are driving there. But most importantly, we then have at an industry level, led through Minerals Council, South Africa, which is the industry body representing the mines. We do have a number of initiatives. On the safety side, we have Kumbule Kaya, which is about CEOship. It's about leadership. And that has been the biggest driver, where our CEOs actually own and take responsibility and prioritize health and safety. And this is done practically. At an industry level, we have what we call the CEO Zero Harm Forum. It meets now monthly. It used to be quarterly, where they would have these meetings to review, our progress on health and safety. But they've now added that every month, every first day of the month, they meet and they actually share leading practices, best practices, anything that they can learn from, especially from incidents that have happened, so that we do not repeat. There's always something to learn from whatever incident that has happened. So I would say that leadership has really driven our improvements, and then those are supported by the initiatives that as officials at the Minerals Council we have, such as the MOSH Learning Hub. It is an initiative which is about identifying and promoting leading practices across the industry, so that each company, whether it's on dust or noise or falls off ground, transport and machinery, all those lessons are learned, and each company tries to adopt those. That has been very successful. On the health side, we have Masoyise Health Program, which is about it's a wellness approach, really, the spectrum from TB, HIV to non-communicable diseases. And its focus is driving a lot of the measurement of, what we do, the screening for these diseases. And I think that the measurement in particular is the one that has made it possible for us to see if we are making progress or not. And so for anyone really, if you are not measuring what you are doing, then you will not see the progress. So that has been very, very powerful, in guiding us and informing us, how we are doing and where the gaps are, where we are lagging, and therefore need to, put in more effort.
Where are the gaps?
Right now, let me start with health. On the health side, we have not seen as much improvement in terms of decline in cases in noise-induced hearing loss. So if we look at the past 15 years, for instance, the other diseases, silicosis, TB, have gone down by more than 80%, but noise-induced hearing loss, a mere 55%. And so it does show that there is this intrinsic challenge when it comes to having pieces of machinery which are not noisy. And I would say that part of the problem is we have a large number of pieces of machinery that are used for mining. And maybe here I can, for instance, talk to the rock drill, both platinum and gold, which is where the challenge is. It's mostly in gold and platinum. rock drills are still used at the face, to extract, to break rock. And those pieces of machinery, it's difficult for us to have some which are emitting less than 103 decibels, I would say. And so sometimes even with that, it's the 103 already is way beyond, the occupational exposure limit. And so beyond that, however, you find that some of the machinery which has been engineered to drop in noise, sound, in terms of sound, is the change management with the employees is such that they will actually damage the piece of machinery because they feel it's not working at the rate that they want. And so I think we need to do a bit more around change management so that if you introduce new pieces of machinery, then you take your employees along for them to understand why the machinery is being, let's say, muffled, for instance. And some people are used to hearing a certain tempo and then they feel I'm really working now. So if it isn't, then they think maybe the production is, it's not going well. And production, of course, for people is always, quite top of mind. So I would say that's the one. Transport and machinery, we also need to still do quite a lot, although there have been advances in that, especially because there is now a requirement, for proximity detection devices to be installed on equipment. And so that has actually assisted such that we have less deaths from transport and machinery related incidents. But probably the gap, some of it's more about the environment that we are in. And there I would say it's the fact that we have seams of, about a meter and lower, which make it difficult to mechanize. Because if we actually didn't have so many people, then we could make big strides. I mean, mines which are mechanized have far less accidents, than the ones which are labor intensive. So that's the fundamental challenge now, where we've got older mines, not mechanized, needing people, and therefore it means now you really need to rely on people. And I always say you can't rely on people. If I wake up in the morning and I have got a bad domestic situation, it's going to be difficult for me to be focused at work. So it's really difficult to depend on people being present and observant all the time. It's not possible. That's why you need to engineer out the risks. So I would say that's part of what we are left with now. It's more the structural, challenges that we have.
Earlier, you were talking about some of the initiatives that are attributed to some of the safety that we have seen and in the health side as well. And that brings me to the idea of continuous learning and training. The role of that in the mining industry, and whether you believe that continuous learning and training can be replicated at other mines and other parts of the continent who are also dealing with health and safety issues.
Most absolutely. I mean, it's continuous. Health and safety, you never arrive. You have to be improving all the time. The training is essential. And I think when it comes to training, we probably underestimate and underutilize the intellect of our own employees. We should be empowering them more, because if you empower employees, then they own and they feel that they own their own health. They will do far more. And this is not even about talking to issues of, the right to refuse dangerous work, which is fundamental. In any environment, people need to feel that they are in a psychologically safe space such that they can actually indicate when I think this rock doesn't look safe. And it's not a question of the the ordinary mine worker can't say that it must only be the supervisor who has a voice, simply because if you have a gang of 15, there's one supervisor. You've actually got 15 pairs of eyes, whereas the supervisor is one person. So I think in our training, we need to emphasize that we empower our workers to feel that they have all the right to speak up, which in the South African situation with our history, it's not necessarily there all the time, which means that you actually need to have a concerted, intentional effort to make sure that each and every employee feels heard, they have a voice, and they can, add to, I believe that even solutions. The workers themselves sometimes can have the solutions on what to do to improve, the environment in terms of health and safety. So that's why for me, training, yes, it's, everyone must have the knowledge, but I think more than anything else, people must have that, they must be empowered so that they own their own health and safety, and therefore are an integral part, of providing solutions and ensuring that there is a safe working environment for them.
The concept of zero harm, is that elusive? Is that possible? Are we getting there?
It's possible. And here I always say, we need to always work towards, have inspirational targets, aspirational targets, that which will lift, and things which we think are impossible sometimes, but if you work towards them, you sometimes find that it is possible. So zero harm is possible, and it's about the leadership, inspiring. In fact, our CEOs, Minerals Council, recently had a CEO conversation on how do we have a step change, in terms of really trying to get to zero harm. And one of the first things was, that inspiring leadership, so that everyone on that mine knows that it is possible that we don't have people that die. It mustn't be normal that, some people should die. So even the 42 people that died last year, we need to have that confidence that if we remove, all the obstacles we learn from the incidents that have been there, then we have that conviction that on a daily basis we are all working towards no harm for employees. So definitely we do believe it is possible. And when we sort of set targets, for instance, through Mine Health and Safety Council, our tripartite, some of them, as I said, we thought would be impossible, but we actually did achieve them, which then shows you that even though it's not overnight or over a year, but ultimately you can actually get to that zero harm.
How do we approach the idea of health and safety, or perhaps even safety on its own, when we bring in illegal miners in the picture who are still, that activity is still quite, prevalent in parts of the continent, in South Africa as well?
Maybe let me start by saying, the terminology we use, there's a huge difference between illegal mining and artisanal, and small-scale mining. On the continent, artisanal mining is quite common. A lot of countries have regulated, and even South Africa is, I think, has already put through some regulations on artisanal mining. Of course, we've got a far bigger formal, mining sector, and that's why maybe those efforts are not so obvious. But artisanal mining is about saying not all, mining is open to everyone, and you actually regulate and you assist those, because these are people who are families or small groups of people. You empower them as a state, I would say, in terms of health and safety. They must know what are the things that they need to look out for, the risks, the noise, the dust, and all of those things. And the state needs to be, because they will not have as much resources as the big companies. So it actually means the state needs to come in far more to support artisanal and small-scale miners. So there is that, which is, as I said, quite prevalent in the continent, which is fairly it's still early stages in South Africa, and we need to probably drive it more, because it does spread the wealth. Because you can imagine, then it's not a few shareholders of a big company that are benefiting. It's economic activity for the community, if that resource is in the community. Now, illegal mining is any mining where you do not have a permit. The permit being whether you are supposed to be a big miner or an artisanal miner, because even with artisanal miners, you're looking at some form of permits. So now the illegal mining, unfortunately in South Africa, we have ended up with old deposits, which are fairly deep. I mean, if we look at Stelfontein, it's 2 kilometers. Now, there's great danger in mining at those depths. It actually needs serious structures to be in place if people are to be safe, not just ropes, going down a rope. And so the illegal mining, we would say it's not something that is to be encouraged at all. And the DMRE, its approach is illegal mining is something that should be, the job of the police to make sure people are not mining illegally, because it can be very dangerous, as we have seen. And even before Stelfontein, there are other tragedies that have been there, where you really have a lot of people dying, because, as I said, South African mines, if you are mining old workings, they are not mines which are, like even 100 meters or 50 meters. It's kilometers underground, so it's quite dangerous.
If you had to imagine the idea of future-proofing the mining industry, what does that look like for you?
Future-proofing starts for me by saying, what's there in the future? How do you make sure the industry is ready for that future? And I would start with women. There's more, women who used not to work underground, they are now working, which means then you need to ensure that the environment is, it's accessible for women in terms of, in all respects, the inclusion, because there's diversity. Yes, to diversify with women, but their inclusion means your facilities, your everything needs to cater for the needs of women. So start with that. I would say there's also the technology. We have technology. The future is technology, and so you need to make sure that your employees are skilled. There's also that skilling the employees, upskilling them, so that for in the future, when there's technology that they need to be using, that change management, as I said, a lot of times you find that there is something which is good for production, but then if you don't take your employees along with change management, it is not going to work. So those are all the things I believe you need to do to make sure that you are future-proofing mining, to say, how will mining be done in the future? Are we then ready in terms of people, in terms of the systems and everything that we use, and make sure that we have all that in place, for the future.
Thank you. For more insights, you can go to miningindaba.com.